Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you. Yes.
Yes. So I guess we should give a minute or so more for people to join. Hello. Hello, I could hear you.
Excellent.
Hello, could you hear me?
Yes, can hear you. So maybe we should slowly get started. Or do you think we should give it another couple of minutes?
Why not get started? There's the preliminaries. So.
Yeah. So first of all, we would need a scribe this meeting.
I can scribe.
Thank you. And if you get tired after a while, you can ask to get relieved by someone else.
Okay, thank you.
So Bernard, you're flipping through the slides. We are at the welcome one. So welcome to this meeting. And as usual, we hope to make progress on both the media capture main and the WebRTC PC specs. And the editors will get the task to update the editor's drafts after the meeting. Maybe not this week, but pretty soon anyway. Okay, let's move on. And this is just the basic information. So Bernard, do you take it from here?
Sure. So we have, we'll be discussing WebRTC first, the pull requests and issues, and then we're going to move on to media capture. So why don't we get started with the WebRTC pull requests. The first one is from Taylor, 979 and PR 996. Taylor.
All right, so this PR just attempts to specify when the SCTV transport object is set and created on the peer connection. And what is in the PR is that it's created when applying a local description, and it's destroyed when a data section is rejected, and that could be either by a local or remote description in the answer. And then on a rollback, if, for example, actually, there may not be any issue with rollback. Oh no, if you were to set an offer, a local offer that created an SCTV transport and then rolled it back, then that would set it back to null. The question that came up in the pull request is whether it should be created when applying a local description or just when applying the answer, because there really isn't an association until there's a local and remote ports, and also if there's a max message size attribute, and until you have a remote description, there wouldn't be a value to place in there, so it would need to be nullable if it were created when applying a local description. So I guess my recommendation would be to change this pull request to create it when an answer is applied.
So would it be sensible to say that it's created when you enter the stable state after applying an answer?
It could also be in the have PR answers state, right?
Yeah, the other way to do it would be to create it in the local state, but have the max message size be nullable, and then it would get filled in when you apply the remote description.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the point of that you have to be able to use it in the PR answer state. It is significant.
Well, it doesn't really do much right now, right?
Yeah.
If
is there any use for it?
If its purpose is to inspect the max message size from STP, then it would be useful even in the PR answer state to be able to do that.
Yeah, I guess it matters what the max message size attribute is there for. As you said, if it represents what's actually applied, then it wouldn't exist till you set the remote description. In WebRTC, it's like there's both a capability and the actual applied value. So there's kind of two different values for it. And there's also no state in the current SCTP transport. So the problem is, I think, you don't really know what state it's in the way it currently is.
So it sounds like the question is whether having it be there in any state is useful before it's in the kind of permanent state, right?
Right.
Because if that's not useful, then we can just say it's not there. And if it is useful, then we need to figure out what intermediary state is useful when it's not in its full state.
Yeah, well put. I would recommend, again, just only creating it when an answer is applied.
If we can't figure out what intermediary state is useful, then just having no such state seems reasonable.
Yeah, like in practice, if you were going to try to shim it, you would, at least in WebRTC, you would create the SCTV transport, but it wouldn't be hooked up until you called set remote description, at which point the state would transition to, connecting and connected.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like just not having it show up in the peer connection until it's in its full state sounds like a good option. Meaning it not until the stable state after the answer.
Again, stable or pure answer?
Well, is there anything useful you would do after you get a pure answer with it?
See the max message size so you can know
right.
the messages you can send.
All right, well, if that's useful, then I guess we do it after peer answer.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. I hate peer answers anyway, but
yeah.
All right, sounds good. I'll modify the pull request.
Okay. Harold?
Let me get my slides. Okay, so this is about when we call getStats with an argument. And the spec has said since roughly forever that when you pass a track to getStats, you get stats relevant to that track. But it hasn't said what stats are relevant to that track. So Jan Ivar and I and Henrik had a little discussion about this in a bug, and it became obvious that Firefox and Chrome are doing two different things. So the pull request I made up basically says, okay, when you get stats with this argument, you get these particular stats back, no more. So I picked the media stream object because that tells you what all the tracks you're associated with. Pick the RTP media stream objects because that's the most useful thing to have to know when you have a track, and then stopped. So a couple of other suggestions were to recurse over all referred to objects from the track, or that referred to the track. And if we recurse that, we get a lot of objects, like the transport, the codecs, the candidates, and so on and so forth. So we're getting pretty close to returning everything, and that doesn't seem too useful. Another proposal was to just quit supporting selectors at all, which would simplify some code. But that wasn't entirely popular in the bug. So this was a big enough change that I wanted group input on it. So what do other people think?
Hi, this is Jan Ivar. I want to clarify a little part where I disagree a little bit, that this would include everything. Basically, I think, just back up a little. Historically, I think we added tracks as selectors because we didn't have senders and receivers at that time. So, but as far as filtering out exactly what you need in JavaScript is super trivial. So there has to be another benefit to filtering in the API itself other than convenience, and I think that would be performance. So I think filtering on tracks makes sense because tracks is one of the things you can add as many of as you want. So since, well, in theory, in practice, I'm sure you hit a ceiling somewhere in the code. So I think it makes sense to have a selector to limit. It also makes sense from an app point of view that you're interested in the video or you're interested in the audio. If you have one of each, you might have multiple video tracks, you might have multiple audio tracks. So I think that makes sense, and it makes it easier to write certain JavaScript where you don't have to iterate on stats, because by filtering down, you know that you don't have multiple certain objects, you have singulars of certain objects. Where I disagree with Harald is that, well, I should back up and say, I think in the stats structures in the dictionaries, we have these, anything that ends with ID is a foreign key reference, so to speak, in that it's a reference that you can then access another stats record in that same snowball you got. And so in a sense, I argued that we should, if there's a reference, we don't want to leave any broken references in data we return, which means I would argue for
that we return what's relevant to a specific track, a video track, and any data that it references. And I don't believe that includes everything, because I still think if you eliminate everything that had to do with the audio in a simple video-audio snowball. And in fact, I think we could specify a simple recursive algorithm that did that by actually starting with the RTP sender or receiver object for a given track, which kind of makes sense because we probably should have made senders and receiver selectors in the first place. So, but regardless of whether we do that now, I still think we could say the algorithm would be for a given track, find its sender or receiver, or the specifically RTP media stream stats, or outbound, whatever the outbound, inbound or outbound RTP stats, include that for that track and every reference, which would automatically pick up the media stream track stats, and as well as all the transports for that track.
So this is Varun. I just want to add my 2 cents to this. I think one of the reasons why people use the track selector is to specifically figure out what the audio and the video track specifically might be doing for their small widget or similar thing. And like just returning the media stream tracks and the inbound, outbound would be sufficient. I don't know. I've not yet seen use cases for like returning the whole blob, which would include the transport and such. So I would caution against returning everything recursively, because then like I'm with Harold on that you would rather just do get stats and like parse that data and filter it trivially from there. Some people who do not want to do that, and they want to just like get some set of stats. That might just be in the past because the 2 objects, the Firefox stats API and the Google or the Chrome stats API, were returning different kind of objects and structures, and they did not want to parse all of that and figure out how to mutate everything into like a standards compliant thing. So I believe like just returning the RTP stream stats and the RTC media stream track stats would be sufficient. And I'm wondering if we can take this middle ground in this case.
So to Jan Ivar's comment, if you do you want to have a recursive inclusion, or do you want to not have a recursive inclusion?
Yes, definitely a recursive inclusion starting with the outbound or inbound RTP data for a given track. Basically, yeah.
So you want, so that includes, and do you want to recurse over forward pointers or both forward and back pointers?
We don't have any back pointers, I hope.
Oh yes, we have.
Which are?
Candidates refer to their transport stats. That's a back pointer. Transport stats don't refer to the candidate apart from the selected candidate pair.
Oh, you're asking should we include candidates or not if you filter on the track?
Yeah, I thought that was the proposal that Jan, you were making, that you would get all the transport and everything.
No.
The reason I'm asking is also because that since all RTP stream stats have pointers to the transports, including back pointers will also include all the other RTP stream stats, which seems to be not what you want.
No, I definitely don't want to follow back pointers.
Okay, no
in
back
fact,
pointers.
If we want to take out, I know Firefox currently includes candidates if you filter on a track. I believe there's some cases where when you're not doing bundle, that it might be useful to see a candidate specific to a track. I don't know of another way to do that. But I'm really not. I'm pretty flexible on whether we want to include candidates or not.
Yeah, no, because if we want to specify whether we include candidates or not, then what I'm getting at is if we have an algorithm that is specified without specified in generic terms, like all pointed to objects or all pointed to and pointers to objects, then it's also unstable for spec changes, because if we add new pointers, we will return new objects.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And that's why I would prefer having a simple recursive algorithm that only follows forward pointers instead of having an arbitrary list that we later have to update.
Yeah, but if you want to follow some pointers and not others, then you need to list them anyway.
Well, sorry. I think we should follow all references. I don't want to assign up or down, but maybe I misunderstood you, Harald. What I meant is if something points to a track, that doesn't necessarily mean that means we should not include it. But whatever data you find in the returned object, if there's a reference to something, that better point to real data. That's my dividing line in my view.
Yeah, I'd like you to not on the call, but later, and walk through exactly what is going to be included, for an example. Because if you can give that list and say that there's nothing that doesn't make sense here, then that's much more real data. So
yes, I agree.
My point about IDs is that IDs are supposed to be stable. So that if you, for instance, get a codec ID and have a previous bundle that includes all the sets, the codec ID is supposed to be the same in those two cases.
Yes.
So you have the possibility of looking up pointed to objects from older stats if you don't care about a current value that's in them.
If the JavaScript has cached a previous version of the stats, yes, that's true.
Yes.
However, if they're just making a isolated call, I think most people would expect to be able, the dereferences would point to data that you could return. And I'm actually not sure there's that big a cost in returning it, frankly.
Yeah. I'd like you to draw up the example and say, okay, if all these are filled in, what are you going to end up returning? Because being specific is usually very good.
Yes, I can do that.
Good.
So that's the conclusion of this one, that Jan-Ivar will make a proposal on what he would like to see.
We have a note from Varun that says he thinks he's able to live with an explicit list, and we have had no other comments. Are there others with opinions on this matter?
Well, I have a comment, Harold, which is just that I think it's important that we have an ability to get just the specific, more or less the specific things that you list, because I think this will be it could be called frequently, just to get an idea of overall quality and packet loss and stuff. So you don't want to pull in everything. It will have a performance impact if you do.
So just to make sure I understand properly, we're talking about casting a version of this current form of the argument, current form of the arguments where we have the media stream track as a selector.
Yes.
I just want to understand that's the proposal, and Jan-Ivar is going to make a proposal on how that works as far as references, how they're followed.
Yes.
Right, and more than a proposal, actually work through a list of what that would actually include, even though that might not end up in the spec. That's more as an algorithm.
Yeah.
I think that was the interest.
Okay, run the algorithm and see if it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, then the algorithm is wrong.
Right. Did anyone want to pursue maybe having senders and receivers as selectors?
I would prefer to see that. I think it's more logical. Especially in the case where the track has two senders, it gets confusing.
Right. It made sense in the time before we had these other objects, but those handles are actually probably more correlated with the underlying transport and byte stats, stuff like that, than the track.
Yeah, I agree as well. This is Randall.
My only concern would be if we break a lot of code.
But the code doesn't work right now.
Okay, that's fine.
Right, the API can tell the difference between the track and the sender in that argument. So that's interesting because that might tie into, I don't know if we're going to talk about other things in the stats today about lifespan of data and tracks. Because if you have a track has become a squarely, that's a word, selector, in that you can of course add and remove a track from a peer connection. You can add the same track to multiple senders. So filtering stats on a track can give you some surprising results in edge cases. And there's some, I know we've gotten stuck a little bit on defining the lifetimes of a lot of this data, including whether stats returns a snapshot or whether it also includes ghosts of the past of every time a track has been, any byte has been sent from a track that's long gone. But I may be speaking out of turn if that's not the current issue.
Yeah, it's not the current issue. But it's an issue, and it's tracked in another issue on the stats spec.
I have a question. If you're going to pursue this sender and receivers as a selector, are we going to deprecate the tracks as a selector?
Seems like that could be a separate question.
Okay, because I guess I think the current issue was about tracks, and I wonder if we're going to move forward with that, or Jan, are you going to propose an alternative? Because there are two questions, and we need to perhaps move on this one as well, in addition to maybe the senders.
I would be in favor of deprecating the track selectors.
I think I may be as well, just from the fact that it would simplify certain, tracks can be tricky to get right.
Yeah, we only did senders and receivers anyway, so.
Yeah, well, they're not very tricky. You just jump to the sender, just take all the senders connected to the track and chew through them. That's what the spec says after the last merge on that one.
But that's an argument that Polyfill can handle it until everyone's moved on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if we were designing this from scratch today, we would definitely do senders and receivers because, again, the data only makes sense for peer connections or peer connection related objects, right? And a track is not. A track doesn't have anything to do with a peer connection. A sender and receiver, represents a track being sent over a peer connection or received over a peer connection. So those are the right objects. So I would be in favor of deprecating the track as well.
Yeah, another benefit of receiver and sender is that this recursive algorithm I mentioned would have one less step.
Yes. So who will write up that proposal on using the sender and receiver as selector? Will you include that, Jan Ivar?
Yeah, I guess it makes sense. I could do it at the same time if no one else wants to.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay, next slide. Peter, reoffer codecs.
So we've had this argument many, many times about whether when you do a reoffer, it should include more codecs than was negotiated. And so I thought that it might be a good idea to just let the application decide. And so here's an example of how it works. You just do the classic create offer. It doesn't reoffer the codecs. But if we add this new reoffer codecs offer option, then if you pass that in as true, then you get the codecs reoffered. And there's a PR for JSEP that defines the behavior of that. And that's about it. The question is just really whether we think this is a good idea to resolve this argument that we keep going through.
I think this probably needs to be resolved in JSF first.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, my current position in JSF is that we don't need this, and I've articulated another solution yesterday. This might, if that has a flaw, I think it's a good idea. But my guess is that reoffer codecs may not be sufficient. We'd also probably have to reoffer new RTC feedback, RTCP feedback mechanisms as well, because they can be per codec. So we're probably getting pretty close to reoffering all like non-transport stuff.
So it'd be reoffer everything?
Well, no, because it wouldn't be like, you wouldn't reoffer like RTCP MUX or whatever, or non-RTCP MUX, but you would reoffer probably extensions, RTCP feedback mechanisms, and codecs.
So reoffer RTC stuff?
Non-transport stuff, or things that don't fall on the transport classification. Now for SCTP, I don't know if there's anything that gets negotiated there that would have to be reauthorized. Anyway, I think they're way out of this, and I don't think we should spend a lot of time debating it here. I think this is a nice fallback if we throw up our hands at JSF and say, Peter, save us.
I'm fine with it being resolved in JSF and then coming back here. But if it is resolved in JSF, would everybody be okay with something like this, or is there a different approach? Or, is someone opposed to having another offer option that correlates to something decided in JSF?
I mean, syntactically, I guess my only question would be, do we want to have like reoffer codecs, reoffer extensions? How we should really think about how to generalize this a little bit.
Yeah, Peter, my only question, which I ask virtually every time now we have any kind of new feature that goes in, is, are you sure it is as simple as you say it is now? Because almost every simple feature we've added has ended up dramatically more complex later. And, we're trying to reduce the number of things we need to repair, fix, adjust, et cetera.
Well, to be clear, if we don't need this, I'm perfectly happy not having it. This was more like if JSEP can't resolve what to do, then, and it needs something like this, then.
Sure, but I think the point that Dan is making is that, let's say that JSEP does indicate that it needs this. Is this like is this the most general way of doing this? Or is this like very ad hoc for one case, but really there are other similar cases that we should also try to handle at the same time?
This was the simplest way I could think of, but someone has a better way that.
I think if you someone should think about the other things and codecs in the list, like you mentioned, extensions and so forth, and think if there's any possible reason to reoffer them. If there is, then a syntax more like reoffer, brace, codecs : true, extensions : true, whatever would probably be a more appropriate syntax, but and more general. If you were certain that there's never any reason to go beyond that, you could stick with this.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you provide a list of the things that you want reoffered.
Yeah.
I'm also worried about codec priorities, since we have added API surface for reordering codecs. If you do reoffer codecs, how does that interact with the priority of codecs? Where's my API for reordering the codecs before creating the offer?
I think that's something that would be resolved in JSEP, just like the rules for what codec order in an original offer.
And that is going to create additional API?
Well, it sounds like this is complex enough that we should make sure that it's really necessary in the JSEP world first, and then if it is, come back.
Yeah, my itching back says extension spec, please. We're like 20 real bugs away from having a WebRTC PC that can go to CR.
Okay, so please spend
Yeah.
my time on this one.
We're not doing this right now anyway, so let's see what the JSF guys do and if we need to do anything.
Yep. Okay, next. This is one I was thinking about skipping.
Is there anything
Yeah,
to talk about today?
I think we're trying to set up a separate call on these things.
Yeah, there's a slide at the end for it, at the end of the deck.
Okay.
Oh, there is. Oh, okay, sorry.
Yes, sorry. So I made a slide at the end. There is, I think, the last slide.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, so let's leave that to the last slide then.
We'll leave it to the end. Okay. All right. So now we have a couple of issues. Harold?
Yep. So this is a request from Philip Egenstedt, who observed that offer to receive audio and offer to receive video is universally implemented. And the API that we said we would use when we remove them from the spec isn't. So there's not that much usage of it. But it's kind of reasonably consistently implemented, and it kind of makes sense. And as I said, the alternatives aren't. But usage is low enough that it would be possible to just deprecate the feature. So spec-wise, we can do one of three things: do nothing, which leaves them out in the dark. We could add them back in as first-order features that we are going to support forever. Or we could put them back in the compatibility section and say, okay, we admit that these things exist, but we don't really like them. So I'd prefer to do nothing because it's least work and gets us to a cleaner spec, but Philip disagrees with me, and what do others think?
I think there was some question in the data about percentage of usage. That there was a low number at first because he was looking at the wrong stat. Did that get resolved?
Well, it turned out that we're counting two paths through this. One is what's called the RTC peer connection create offer options offer to receive. That's a long term. And that's what when people are using the promise-based version of create offer, basically. And the other one was offers created with I think this is the mandatory and optional, old mandatory and optional syntax for offer options. That's why it's legacy offer options. And the numbers there are counting every use of that particular syntax. So we know that the number is less than this, but we don't know how much less.
So I'm looking at full. Go ahead, sorry.
That's 0.05%. Yes, Philip's comment on this will vary a bit.
Yeah, I see the comment 12 days ago. He found the right use counter for the callback-based variant. So usage is approximately 0.004%, which is 1% of calls of the callback-based create offer.
Yep, but that's Jan Ivar said that. Yeah, Philip said that Jan Ivar found it, but I looked at that metric and it counts all the calls to this syntax. So, if you do you have a backing for the claim that all of these have offer to receive in them?
No, I don't know. Although I would say that without this, there's really no way today to do receive only. Is that right? So Are we saying that no one's doing receive only?
Yes, we're saying that no one is negotiating receive only.
Okay.
I know we get bugs on from people who are doing or trying to do receive only. So I'm not so certain it's no one.
Yeah, and WebRTC used to use this for the case where one side didn't have a webcam and wanted to still receive video. I'm trying to find out if it still is there in the code. But there was, it's just all like a real problem.
Yeah, we get bugs on that issue frequently.
Yeah, also we've heard from a game developers, their receive-only scenarios.
Yeah, and it's still in the WebRTC production code right now for that exact reason.
So what syntax is it using?
So it uses the integer, but it's set to 1. My guess is that for all practical purposes, we could, clamp the integer at 1. My guess is that nobody, since we don't support in Chrome, correct me if I'm wrong, more than 1, we don't need to worry about like the case of somebody using 5 or something for the future.
Yeah, Firefox only supports true and false also.
So my guess is that if we are worried, in fact, about backcompat, we should sort of, only accept true, false, 1 or 0, and then move on. I think it'd be good to have a deprecation warning too. Like, this is not the best API for achieving this purpose.
Yeah, we're only supposed to put deprecation warnings in when we actually have an intent to remove it. So what I'm hearing you saying is that the consistent implementation is that we only support 1.
Yeah.
And so we certainly don't want to put in the spec supporting more than 1 and expecting consistent behavior from it.
Right.
So that sounds like a backup, putting it into the compatibility section, saying that, okay, we admit that this option has existed and people are still using it, so you should make it work.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I would love to not include it. I don't think we have a strong case given that no implementation implements the alternative.
No, not if we want to get out. So I take that as a hold your nose and add the backward compatibility section.
Sounds good.
Yep. Yep. Shouldn't be too hard. I like decisions.
And because it's in backward compatibility, I don't think we'd have to deal with the interaction with AdTrack or AdTransceiver.
Nah. We might want to specify it in terms of what you would have to do the same thing with AdTrack, AdTransceiver. But let's go on to buy.
Okay. So there were a couple of questions that came up. One was if a receiver receives a buy from a sender, what actually happens? And then what are the situations in which a buy is sent? For example, if you have transceiver.stop set to true, either because you called stop or because you had the other remote peer called stop, does it send a buy? Do you send a buy in other circumstances, such as calling replace track null or setting track.enable to false or calling track.stop? So here is the proposed resolution. The general principle suggested by Harold is that the buy is sent only if the SSSE won't be used again. And then if you get a buy as a receiver, the receiver.track.onmute event handler would fire. And the implication is that if transceiver.stop is set to true, then you would send a buy for all of the transceiver.senders encodings.ssrc, encodings.fec.ssrc, and then encodings.rtx.ssrc. But you wouldn't send a buy for replace track null, because you could call replace track with another track that would make the SSRC active again. Similarly, there'd be no buy for transceiver.sender.track enabled set to false, because you could set it back, or transceiver.sender.track.stop, because you could call replace track, and then you would be sending again. Does this make sense?
Makes sense.
Makes sense to me.
Okay.
Okay, seems.
I have a question. On the first, so in combination with A and B, if the receiver receives any buy, it fires on mute. What if it receives a buy for just, say, the RTX SSRC?
Right. Actually, that's a good question. Or the FEC SSRC. Yeah, probably the answer is it should only fire on mute if it's media. It's a media SSRC, not an RTX or FEC.
But then if it's a video, and well, I guess we don't receive simulcast. So.
Yeah, if you see buy on only some tracks of a multicast group, then of a simulcast group, then it's interesting.
Well, the weird thing here, right, is that you have both an on mute and a mute event handler, right? So, I mean, basically, I think the RTX and the FEC case are the ones where you shouldn't fire it. But if the media, if even you could argue that even if, well, we shouldn't be receiving more than one SSRC at once, at least in WebRTC 1.0, because we don't support simulcast reception. But even if you did, you could fire on mute, and then when the other one shows up, you would, I guess, fire the unmute event.
Seems like a corner case anyway.
Yeah.
So we do need to write something down.
Sure. I mean, I agree. I'm just like
maybe a rule like all primary SSRCs.
Yeah.
Where we have to define primary SSRC with the right RTP lingo that means that.
Right.
Right.
The most likely scenario where it happens is if one of the buys gets lost.
Well, if the buy is lost, then you don't fire on mute because you didn't get it.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And typically when this happens, when you actually have the sender at stopped, you're going to have an offer-answer exchange. And when you get the offer with the stopped transceiver, it's going to set it to mute it anyway, right?
Right. Well,
that's
yeah, it depends, I guess, what it does, but yeah.
So basically, as soon as the transceiver stopped, you'll get this buy, but then eventually with the OA, even if the buy is lost, you still get the same result.
Yeah.
This seems fine.
Okay. All right. Next one.
Sorry, Bernard, we need to back up and have a summary because I think we lost the scribe, and so we need to enter.
Yeah. So basically, I'm going to submit PRs for different pieces of this. I got a PR now for aspect B, and based on what was discussed here, I'll work on a PR for aspect A, which is exactly when the on-mute fires.
But did we conclude on B if you get a buy for only the FEC stream, for example? What happens?
Nothing.
Well, I think the suggestion was that ignore the buys for the FEC and the RTX SSRCs. They don't count.
You're right. I mean, we're discussing the API here. That makes sense.
So I guess Peter's suggestion was that really the one that matters is, I guess, the primary SSRC, and we'll have to figure out exactly how to describe that.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Are we done with this?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Issue 962, which is if a reoffer is received with the M line having a 0 port, so like if the other side remote peer calls transceiver.stop, then when the remote description is applied, then transceiver.stop will be set to true, so it stops the other one. And the question was, does this cause the on-ended event handler to fire? And the proposed resolution is that yes, we would say that that's what would happen. And that's a way to know that when you called set remote description, transceiver.stop was set to true, because in the event handler you can check whether in fact transceiver.stop is true or not.
So from the difference from the previous one, why wouldn't we just be on-ended upon getting a buy?
Well, because the difference is transceiver.stop is irreversible, and a buy, things can start up again.
But that's the only thing that could generate the buy was when the transceiver was stopped.
Well,
whether or not that's conflict, or there might not be a WebRTC component exactly.
Yeah, there's some weird, I guess, weird cases, like if an SFU is sending you stuff rather than WebRTC. I guess it could be a situation where you get a buy and then you start receiving again.
Right, but then that kind of makes the value of any on-mute reduced, because you could get on-mute because one SSRC is stopping use and another SSRC starts up immediately after.
Right. Yeah, I mean that actually can happen.
It gets muted and then unmuted.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you can go ended and unended though. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So basically, so we're saying that on-ended would fire when transceiver.stop gets set to true from remote action. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So that's so basically I'm going to work on a PR for describing exactly what happens when you set remote description on a 0M line, and it looks a lot like when you call transceiver.stop with respect to that, and in adding the unended event handler.
You probably have a section, steps to stop a transceiver, and then reference that in both places. It's such a status
Right,
oriented.
exactly. Yeah, it's pretty much the same. It's gonna be pretty much the same, I guess, with the difference of the unended event handler. Okay. So now I think we can go on to media capture.
Yep.
And Stefan.
Yeah. So this is if we should revive create object URL or not. And as a background, in the beginning we had this URL.createObject URL for a media stream as the only way to have a media element play the media stream. All implementations at that time supported it, but they were prefixed. The group later decided that this was not a good way to do it, and instead we introduced the source object. And we had the source object as an extension for the media element in our spec for some time, but then it has been taken over by the HTML5 speccers. And the last working draft where it occurred was the URL.createObjectURL was dated 2013, and then unfortunately we didn't get a new working draft out without it until February 2015. And there were some good reasons for this change. One was that this createObjectURL that we modeled after the file API wasn't really stable. I mean, was it one-time usage or not? And how do you evoke it and so on? There was also remember that there were some garbage collection issues related to it. Anyway, let's move on to the next slide. However, now we have the situation that all vendor prefixes were removed at some point, and all implementations, and that include Edge and WebKit, now support createObjectURL. And we have counters comparing the usage of createObjectURL with using source object, and it shows that the former is much more common. Next slide. So, I mean, the discussion is really, should we revive this createObjectURL? Since we know that implementations will continue to support it, or should we try to convince implementers to remove support of it? That would break applications, but we have a polyfill that apparently doesn't work in all cases in adapter.js. Or should we spec it again, put it back into our spec? And it's not as easy as putting it back. We need some work, because I don't think what we had really was consistently implemented or in line with how the file API specs is today.
I would absolutely love to get rid of the implementation of this. I never liked it. The only reason we implemented it in the first place is because Chrome didn't have source object, and everyone was writing examples that used createObjectURL, and we held our noses and implemented it. And it has real issues, and I would love to see it go away. I'm happy to start pushing deprecation warnings when it gets used.
Yeah, the reason we took it out back when we did, and it was long before 2015 that it went out in the editor's drafts. But the reason we took it out was because it was not clear how to spec it. People disagreed on exactly how it should work. And it was expected to, again, have a good number of issues. So just because people have not switched over to using it yet, I don't think is a good reason to encourage the use of something that's probably going to require substantial more work, assuming it is even possible to spec properly.
Yeah, this is Janivar. I would also like to see it gone. I mean, there are side effects of using it. Very few. I think if you instrumented revoke object URL, you'd find a lot of people don't ever call revoke, which means you can actually end up with a camera being on, even if you have no more users. So in cases where you don't call stop explicitly. So it's obviously a much worse API, and I would love to get rid of it. That said, yeah. So again, my litmus test earlier, here we actually have all the major browsers now do implement source objects. So I don't see an obstacle to deprecating it, other than that people need to do it, and
now,
probably it's going to take some time.
Now that source objects is implemented, I would love to start pushing deprecation warnings on this on the next version of Firefox that goes out.
I mean, it is deprecated from the spec since 2013 or something like that. I mean, what we're talking about is deprecation from the implementations. And
yep, and as soon as we see the usage drop off sufficiently, I would remove the implementation.
Do people from Chrome and Edge side agree?
For Edge implementation, we can start documenting deprecation in our MSDN website. We would like to encourage people to move to source object, for sure.
No comment from Chrome people?
Harold, I mean, the source object seems like the way we want to go. Harold, what are your thoughts from Chrome perspective?
I would really like to see it disappear. It's broken in so many ways, and the question is whether we can get people to switch. Now, Jan-Ivar landed a patch to adapted a JS that polyfilled it. Unfortunately, that managed to break at least one Raspberry Pi.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's not like everyone's okay with everything, but if we can get, I think the usage is high for just say starting to emit deprecation warnings. So we have to do some tricks to get people to actually get off it. But I would be happy to see it gone. Yes.
But all want to see it gone, and it's just a question of how do we go about doing it? Because there's code that uses it right now. That seems like
the first thing to do is probably to go into our own code repos and app code repos and search for create object URL and delete it with malice.
I think we should do that. We should make a posting to discuss WebRTC saying it's going to go away, and that people should start moving off of it. If people are uneasy with pushing deprecation warnings in release, I would happily push deprecation warnings in everything up through release to start, and so that we can to start poking at people to start moving off. You gotta poke them.
So what I hear is that we will not reintroduce create object URL in the spec, and implementers are going to work with different tools to get users to stop using it.
Right.
Yep. Thank you. That's enough. Jan-Ivar?
So this was more of an observation that currently in the media capture spec, we do specify the old navigator.getUserMedia as a legacy method. Uses the old callback-based API. And the reasons we gave for that was to not break existing usage. However, the way we've specified it, we didn't freeze implementation. It's just a shim to the regular Navigator media devices get user media, which has evolved, which brings to that over the last year at least, as the spec has evolved, we've actually made changes that also affect the legacy API. So including error messages like permission denied error became security error, which later became not allowed error. And also there was a case where Firefox was actually both, if you call get user media with video true and audio true, and you can't get both, let's say the system doesn't have, only has the camera, but only has a microphone but no camera, then we should fail with not found error. And both in Firefox and Chrome, in that particular case where the hardware is missing, it would actually succeed and return only one track. So that got fixed. In Firefox, I think it's still broken in Chrome, in the case where hardware is absent. And so I think they'll see too, when they want to fix that, they have to consider whether they want to break. There's a choice there between whether just breaking the spec, but we're also breaking the legacy API, which kind of goes against the reasons why we have the legacy API to begin with. So, I mean, this is hard to do now because Edge has come online as well, and with Get User Media supporting the legacy API, we've all implemented at different points in time, different things. So it's probably too late to do much, but I just wanted to bring this out there that it sort of undermines why we define, I guess I want to get some clarity from someone why we define these legacy methods in the spec if they're not going to be backwards compatible.
So Yanavar, I'll give you one impression that I have, which is that I think people expected that error handling would change and be updated in the spec, because that was a known weak area essentially by every developer for a very long time, right? So the examples that you've given all have to do with error checking, error handling, etc. I think that's different from sort of the promises in this specific case that we had made about the API for the Get User Media call, where when we had this discussion before, we said, look, we told everybody use this line, and everything will work, and then we changed it, right? So to me, I don't think it's quite as cut and dried, as you positioned it, where if we're going to support legacy, we're going to 100% support exactly that version of legacy. I mean, all we're really trying to do is make sure that, people who coded it one way don't have to think about changing that part of the code, even though we expect that they're going to have to change the error handling everywhere.
Right.
It's not perfect, it's not precise, but anyway, that's my opinion on it.
Yeah. One thing I left out here is also constraints, and that if you look at legacy, different browsers implemented different constraints for a long time, and it gets. But by including legacy in the spec, we're specifically saying that new browsers have to implement. We're basically saying what new browsers have to implement. So, and we're kind of saying you have to implement the whole subset. And maybe I think if we don't want to remove the legacy methods from the spec, maybe maybe we could limit what is required to implement for new browsers. To, let's say, maybe if you use a callback API, don't expect constraints to work other than true and true or true and false, stuff like that. Or if the group is happy with, I just wanted to point this out, just as a reminder more than anything else. I'm happy to do nothing.
So if we do nothing, we specify basically the old methods are a shim on the new methods, and the behavior is specified in terms of the new methods. And that means that we're not providing the old specs way of doing it. We're providing a shim on the new methods that look like the old spec. I think that's what we're set out to do.
Given how hard we have to keep things we removed 2013 out of the spec, I'm sort of hesitant to remove stuff now.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So do nothing.
Yeah, let's do that. Just do nothing. I don't see strong arbiter with something. Okay, what's next? Move advanced out of constrainable pattern. got assigned to me just because, well, Jan Ivar suggested that we should move advanced out of constrainable pattern and, as I understand him, into the part of the spec that talks about the constrainable pattern used in get user media. So there's
maybe
no
Jan Ivar
suggestion.
could just explain that a little bit first.
Sure. Well, it ties into this previous slide a little bit, doesn't it? In that I'm just trying to shed luggage here or baggage from a legacy baggage, and that we used to have advanced, and then we iterated on it, and we came up with something better. And in the last couple of years, so we've had this new API, at least in Firefox. I've not seen any use cases where you had to pull out advanced to get what you wanted. Most people could usually get what they wanted with min, max, and ideal, where ideal has weight. So if there's, so in a sense, I'm asking if we need advanced for backwards compatibility, as one argument I heard, there doesn't seem to be any need to keep it around in the constrainable pattern, and it could be instead moved to as a legacy part of get user media specifically, so that this constrainable pattern has it's been suggested to be used in other specs, like I think image capture is looking at perhaps using it, and it's become a big obstacle to adoption of the constrainable pattern. I can't believe I'm arguing for the constrainable pattern, but there are some cases where they want to extend, where perhaps it could be useful. And but right now, in order to adopt a constrainable pattern to get min, max, and ideal, they also have to adopt and implement the advanced syntax, which is quite a lot of work to implement one, let alone both of these algorithms. So it doesn't seem that it needs to be in the pattern.
So again, Dan again, on principle, I agree with you. I just took a look in the spec to see what it would require to move advanced out. Advanced is really strongly embedded in all of the explanations, definitions, etc. There are at least 5 to 10 locations where it is mentioned in a normative way in the constrainable pattern, and there are at least 5 to 10 additional places where there are descriptions of its behavior that may perhaps not be normative, but are still sort of embedded with everything else, right? So there are examples that include it and so on. As a practical matter, I'm a little concerned with the ability to move it and retain sanity and understandability.
Right. On the flip side, though, is there an opportunity to simplify the algorithm? Because it's quite a lot of words already.
Well, it would simplify the constrainable pattern, but the point is, if we have to describe it in another place in the spec, then we have to not just describe advanced. We're actually saying, insert these lines here, and oh, by the way, in the description of the algorithm's behavior, the general description, you need to also insert this as well, and watch out for this special case, and so on.
So I'm saying, I think there would be an easy way to fix this, although not a nice way, which would be to say that constrainable pattern algorithm has a flag which says whether advanced is supported or not. And wherever advanced is mentioned, you say this part only applies if the advanced flag is set. And that way, image capture can reuse the pattern saying that this is running this without the advanced flag set.
Just information about the image capture. The way they currently have the current pull request for using constraints with image capture is simply adding more constraints on the media stream track. So advanced would still apply to that particular usage.
That's true. Well, if we foresee no future uses of this pattern, then perhaps there's an opportunity to defer this question.
Deferring the question to where we have a specific instance of I want to use this, but I don't want advanced, seems like a reasonable thing to do. Oh, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was assuming there was a strong problem with it right now, based on what Janivard said.
Well, it's not clear yet in image capture, but it looks like they're going to extend. Well, I don't know how much we should discuss image capture, but image capture is looking at two basically different kinds of settings, and they're kind of muddled together right now. And there are settings that apply to the video part immediately, and there are settings that only apply during the actual capture, the take photo. And they have different lifespans. I mean, and they should probably use. So the last thing they're talking about is using regular media stream track constraints for anything that applies to video, and using a different mechanism, maybe closer to what they have already, for the take capture settings, to call it that. And I guess they're not going to use constrainable pattern. They may still use constrainable pattern for the second thing. I don't know, but
yeah. So the suggestion is pull request number 146 on the spec.
Right. On my end, this is more of a witch hunt against advanced.
So I guess at the moment we don't really need to move, right? So.
Well, will there be opportunities in the future, I guess is one way to phrase it, to remove this.
Yeah, I mean, we can always revise our specs if we realize they're not good. So.
Okay, I'll take that.
Okay.
Okay, defer it is.
And now we're back to 1000.
So I created this new pull request, and the main question is still open, that we should implement the standard credential in separated dictionaries, or
you're breaking up. That's where I'm losing it.
Sounded fine to me.
Yeah, sounded fine to me too.
Okay. Then I'm losing
okay.
it.
So the main question is still that we should implement in separated dictionaries or in hybrid. You will find in the issue 7.14 that these options at the end, as Justin described. And I still need or waiting for the group consensus, and I created this separated option because I feel it's more right, because it's more future proof and so on, and more clean version. I got some feedback about my smaller questions from Justin. It is not totally finished. I didn't edit the algorithm part that just recently received from Justin, but the main question is that should I work on this, or only the hybrid is acceptable for the group, because it's too late to change this so radically or so deeply. And I would like to hear the group opinions and have the final word from the chairs. If it is not the right direction, then I will work on the hybrid.
This is Bernard. I'm agree with Justin on number 3, hybrid.
Does anybody else have a perspective on this? I think this is really a question of, basically code that is written today that accesses the return server, is going to specify the password field as it exists today, and that code would need to change if we went with the separated approach number 2. So I don't know exactly what rubric or metric we've used here in this working group to decide, what's like an acceptable breaking change or not. But I think this is largely not an OAuth question. This is a question really about, what amount of spectrum we're willing to tolerate. And if we're not willing to make people change their code who are using return servers today, we have to either take the number 3 or number 1 approach.
Right.
I know Kung doesn't want option number 1, but he is really the sole voice of dissent there. So I wouldn't get, that's 1 vote.
I would agree. I would be willing to become to the second vote against number 1.
Okay.
The reason being that it's almost certain that sooner or later we're going to add a 3rd one.
Yes.
Become another attribute. Yeah, sure. I agree with that thinking. I just wanted to. The bullet that's here for why not consider option 1, I don't consider to be a open and shut argument. Okay, so between 2 and 3, the road becomes, I guess, just a question of spec churn.
Yeah, and spec churn or implementation churn. Breaking people's code.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I'm personally much more hesitant to break people's code now after this experience with create object URL.
Right.
Yeah.
But it will be very difficult if you add, for example, the idea what I last mentioned to Justin about just add the realm something to this hybrid solution, where to add this optional realm thing for example. So if you want to do add something, then it is not, I think, straightforward or understandable maybe for the developers where to add. I think option 2 is self-explaining, and so this is why I'm backing the option 2.
Yeah, it would be nice to kind of see that here on the slide. It's not clear to me why realm couldn't be handled in the option 2 case, why it couldn't be put into those objects.
It's not clear where to put in the new object, create a new object with these new attributes with username, password, and realm, or put inside and extend with a new attribute next to the username and password. For me, it's not clear situation.
I would agree you have an option, but still it would have to be spec'd somewhere, and that is where we would write it down.
Okay, so conclusion that option 3, so the hybrid is the way. Can I say?
Fine with me.
I think that hybrid seems to be what we have to implement anyway in order to not break users. So let's just expect that.
Okay.
Right. If we do need some iteration of this in the future, we could always have like this grandfathered way of doing password, and perhaps have some more thing like the separate way in the future. In addition, should we actually need that? So I don't think we're trying to close the door on student-like approach in the future, but for now, I think 3 is the way to go.
Yeah. I would like to make username formally optional, just to be a little closer to the fully separate version, but that's in the name of making things useful.
Okay, that seems like a reasonable way to proceed too. So why don't we capture that for the minutes that's included in the PR?
Yep. Okay, let's go on.
Yep. I think that's it. Wow.
Wow, 4 minutes early.
We're excellent. This timing stuff. I'm amazed.
We must really be getting close to the end.
I certainly hope so.
Let's hope so.
We got to stop meeting like this. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks everyone,
thanks
and especially thanks to Scribes. Thanks.
Bye for now.
Thank you. Coffee for the next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.